physically and emotionally and spiritually need love. There's a pretty extreme example, but during the Balkan Wars, after the fall of communism in Romania, they went in and they found all of these orphanages in Romania where the children were so neglected that they weren't even really held at all. At any rate, in Romania, the international community went in and they discovered all of these orphanages that had been run by the communist Ceausescu regime, where these children were under extreme neglect. And obviously you can't run that as a psychological experiment because it's completely unethical. But when disasters sort of just happen naturally, you can study the effects of what has already happened without it being unethical. And so they discovered that these Romanian orphans who had been just left in their cribs and maybe held only once or twice a day just to feed them and then completely ignored for the rest of the time were just completely underdeveloped in every other way. They were much smaller than they ought to have been for their age. And so that just demonstrates the need for physical affection as a human being, whether you're a child or all the way up through, you guys college folks and older, trying to pair off later in life, find that permanent roommate. I realize that Valentine's Day is coming up in a few weeks, and I understand that it's maybe a hard time of year for some of you who feel like you need that love in your life and you don't necessarily have it right now. But human nature, we're designed for relationships, to the point that in God's wisdom, our social and actually our physical well-being are intertwined. That if you live a life completely devoid of love, you will be physically less healthy, as is demonstrated with those orphans. And it's not only a romance thing, but that's certainly a very normal and central relationship in the Bible and for most people. The psychologist Carl Rogers talks about how people need unconditional positive regard, and that's a good thing. Secular psychology is right in a lot of the observations it makes about human nature. So you may have heard that phrase before, unconditional positive regard, when they go and then try to tell us why we are this way and what we should do about it. They tend to get off mark, but this observation that we all need acceptance, we all need love, is a good one and a biblical one. And yet, of course, as with everything, then sin comes into the picture and fouls everything up. We need others, and yet at the very same time, we are naturally inclined towards selfishness, towards extortion, towards abusing one another instead of loving one another, using each other for personal gain instead of self-sacrificially loving each other. We even go so far as to redefine love. We take a good thing, unconditional positive regard, and we twist it, we redefine it so that now to love someone means that they are immune from criticism. You can never be offended or have a problem with anything that anyone does ever, and that's what we mean by love. If you do anything else, you're not being loving. We live in a political climate today where even to be exposed to disagreement, to have someone say, no, I don't actually agree with every idea that you have, is to be considered unloving. And it's actually, in some cases, that you're actively harming that person that you're disagreeing with. Or we talk about love languages, right? You guys have heard Gary Chapman 5 love languages. And that's a good thing. That's a great way to be able to go and love other people in your life in ways that they will be able to best receive that love from you. But that's not really how we use it, is it? No, it's how do I receive love and how can I tell other people how to love me? See, we even twist that. Well, thankfully, this malfunction of ours is nothing new. It's been this way since nearly the beginning of time. Sin entered the picture and started this whole mess very early in the book of Genesis. And as we study this passage together this morning, we're going to first look at how this basic human desire, this need for relationship, this need for love, manifests in the various characters here in this chapter in sinful and harmful ways. And then we'll examine God's plans in back of all of that and really in control of all of that human psychology that's going on. And maybe your life will look a little bit similar to one of these things. So just 2 points this morning. I know there's usually 3, but today there's just 2. We're going to look at man's plans and then God's plans. A very simple structure for you. So first of all, what exactly are the human desires? What are mankind's plans here in this chapter? If you haven't noticed, this family of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and his 12 sons, it's a special family, the chosen family, and yet at the very same time, they are really complicated, right? They have a lot of family drama. So if you were sitting here thinking that it's only you, think again, it's right here in the Bible. This family is loaded with all kinds of drama together. And it's about to get even more complicated, even more convoluted as they try yet again. They never learn their lesson as they try yet again to take matters into their own hands and get what they perceive that they need instead of waiting on God's proven goodness, waiting on the Lord. This is just that repeated story that all of us kind of live out again and again, isn't it? God promises us something good. He says, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to give you the shalom that I designed you to have if you just wait for me to give it, that completeness, that wholeness, that everything in your life is right. That is a promise from me to you. And then we get impatient and we take shortcuts and we actually end up shortchanging ourselves from all that God intended for us in the process. So first we'll start with Jacob. He is kind of at the center of this story and certainly this chapter. What is Jacob's desire? Where is Jacob looking for love in this chapter? Well, he's searching for a wife, right? A wife is a good thing, amen? Right? The Bible tells us, Genesis 2, the way that God created men and women. And then the Lord said, it's not good that the man should be alone. I will make a helper fit for him, right? It's that way from the very beginning. One man, one woman together, that's a good thing. Finding a wife is a good thing. Proverbs 18, he who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. So that's ostensibly, at least on paper, that's the reason for Jacob's flight here in this chapter, why he's leaving his home away from his parents and up to Uncle Laban in Paddan Aram. Now, obviously, they also need to get him out of harm's way, right? Esau's trying to kill him, and so they need to get him out of there so that he doesn't catch up with him. But if he's going to be going so far away anyway, 2 birds with 1 stone, let's get him married off at the same time. Moreover, we saw before that Esau actually specifically went out of his way to marry unbelieving and idolatrous women specifically in order to be a thorn in his parents' side. He said, oh, my parents hate these Hittite women. I'm going to marry more of them. And so Rebekah says, I want better for my son, for Jacob. Just as an aside, some of you, because of fear, are tempted to compromise and to pursue unbelievers in a romantic way, either through missionary dating. You're like, oh, I'm going to date them in order to convert them, to show them what Christianity is all about. Or simply because you're afraid that you might be running out of options. And I'm here to tell you, just don't do it. It is utterly foolish. Not only is it guaranteed almost, I wish that this never worked. I can't say 100%, but like 95%, not only is it guaranteed to weaken your own faith, weaken your testimony, but it's not very likely to be of any spiritual benefit to the person that you're supposedly dating to benefit them spiritually. It's an expression of lack of trust in God, and it is ultimately going to be harmful to your own self. You're setting yourself up for a lifetime of heartache and needless pain. The Bible says that it's actually better to be forever alone than to bind yourself to someone with whom you don't share the most basic fundamental agreements when it comes to your family and spiritual things and even what kind of world we live in. Proverbs 25, it's better to live in a corner of the housetop than in a house shared with a quarrelsome wife. Don't be bound together with unbelievers. What fellowship could you possibly have? All right, that ends the rant there, that little aside. But see, at this stage of the Bible story, as things unfold, the population of the entire earth is actually still really small. And so this particular family, Abraham's family, is really closely tied. They're basically the only monotheists on the entire earth. Everybody else is worshiping false gods, are idolaters. And so true religion is closely associated with ethnicity at this point in history. That is pure worship of the one true and living God, and close family ties, close relations to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, their family, goes hand in hand. And so the mission is, we're going to send Jacob back to our family, back to our relatives, just like Abram sent his servant back to his family earlier in the story to take a wife for Isaac, right? This is like the equivalent. They didn't have the internet, but if they did, this is like SemiteMingle.com, except it's not just like Jewish people in all of these nations. It's literally the descendants of the family of Shem. Like, go to those people and not the other people, and you'll find good, solid, believing women to marry. And so he travels all the way back to Paddan Aram, way up in the north, and lo and behold, Jacob very quickly runs into the employees of the very guy that he's looking for, his uncle Laban. So Jacob is a little bit surprised at first that they know Laban. I'm just recapping here the verses that we didn't read before our passage begins. He makes a little bit of small talk with the shepherds that he runs into, because they have to wait around anyway. There's a whole bunch of different herds, and they have to wait until everybody's gathered, and then they will open the well and water the sheep. So they're just waiting around. And then, as he's just kind of wasting time, this is the moment where you cue the dramatic music, and across the room, they lock eyes, and he sees Rachel coming over, and it's love at first sight, and there's good TV here, right? So Rachel comes over, and they hit it off really well. It's just a couple of verses. And why is that? Why does Jacob love Rachel so much? He doesn't know anything about her. He just sees her. He sets eyes on her, and then it says that he loves her. Well, we can see what's important to Jacob, can't we? He's not a subtle guy. He wears his heart on his sleeve. Everything is just out there on display. It says he sees her. He sees her sheep. All right, so there's Rachel, and Rachel is a shepherdess. She's got a lot of sheep. And then what does he do? He weeps, first of all. He's very outwardly emotional. He actually cries. Then he shows off his incredible macho strength by single-handedly moving this massive stone off of the well that it would have normally taken 3 or 4 guys to move because it's that heavy. He's like, I'm going to show that I'm a bodybuilder. He just lifts this huge stone, throws it out of the way so that they can get well water for the sheep. Then he kisses Rachel. Before he even says hello, he doesn't introduce himself. He just weeps, moves the stone, kisses her, and then he says, by the way, I'm Jacob, I'm your cousin. Right? That's a bold move. That is good TV right there. Well, what is all of that little scene that's really only 1 or 2 verses? What does that tell us about what Jacob is looking for in a wife? See, when Abraham's servant came this way to look for a wife for Isaac, when he found Rebekah for Isaac, the whole thing was bathed in prayer the whole way. He was actually very skeptical that Rebekah might be the one until God made it abundantly clear again and again through Rebekah's character and her kindness. And then he knew, okay, this is the one. Jacob doesn't have any time for that. It's like, okay, she's hot, she's rich. That's all I need to know, right? Looks good, lots of sheep. hot, rich, we're good to go. That's his priorities. And so they make a couple of really quick arrangements, and that this is what Jacob's looking for actually gets reinforced, because he negotiates real quick with Laban, and it turns out, well, there's another daughter in the picture, right? An older sister, Leah. And this is where our passage begins this morning. And we read that Leah has weak eyes, which is kind of a weird thing to say in English. But, for that Hebrew culture, beauty was in the eyes, especially. You go and look at a Renoir painting. Renoir is renowned for how he's really able to capture eyes specifically. In all of his paintings, you're immediately drawn to the eyes. They just stand out, they pop, they follow you. And a good painter like Renoir understands what this verse is talking about. In that culture, the most beautiful person, it's all about the eyes. And just comparatively, Leah, I guess she doesn't have that sparkle that is just known as beauty to these people. It doesn't necessarily say that she's unattractive per se. You could maybe kind of spin this word weak eyes as a positive thing. But what is really clear is that, even if Leah is like a 7 or an 8, Rachel is a 10 to Jacob, right? She's an 11, right? Side note to all of you brothers, again, your wife is always a 10, amen? Right? I'll tell you, this is secret way. This is how you guarantee that your wife is a 10, that you're not settling at all. Number 1 is don't date more than one person at a time. And number 2 is don't shop around. Stop looking at other women. If you do those 2 things, trust me, if you are blessed, your wife will always be a 10 in your eyes. See, too many guys pass up perfectly wonderful, godly women because we have this same fault and failure as Jacob, right? So let me flip that around on you. First of all, none of you are getting any better looking, right? That's just not how it works, right? As we get older, we don't look as good, right? I used to have hair here, all right? I understand that I'm not getting better looking with age, but if you are soaking up godly character and inner beauty, if you're looking at the things that attract Isaac to Rebekah instead of the things that attract Jacob to Rachel, if you're drawn to that inner beauty, the things that God calls beautiful, and you stop looking at every single other woman on a magazine or on the street or on the internet, then very quickly you will find that the one you're with becomes a 10 and stays there. Right? So it's not hard. It's not rocket science. That is how you marry a 10, every single one of you. Right? So the Bible tells us Jacob loves Rachel. He came here for a wife. He very quickly found success right away. Doesn't waste any time. But it's not because he has exemplary faith. It's simply through ordinary worldly means. And because of that, he seems to get exactly what he's looking for. If he settles for physical attractiveness and worldly means of comfort, lots of sheep means lots of money, then he gets exactly what he was looking for. And we'll see how well those priorities work out for him shortly, whether what he wanted is actually good for him in the long term. But then Jacob's not the only one in this story. Let's look at Laban for a few minutes, because Laban is really an example of self-love. If Jacob was looking for love in the traditional sense, looking for a wife, Laban is just looking for money, for prosperity. How can I love me more and get ahead in life? After all, Jacob is not the only one with an agenda in this passage. So Jacob, we're in Laban's perspective now. Jacob shows up unexpectedly. I guess every visit is unexpected back then because you can't call ahead on your cell phone, hey, I'm going to come 75 miles and visit you. So he shows up unexpectedly, and he expresses immediate interest in arranging to marry Laban's daughter. Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, I'm going to serve you 7 years for your younger daughter, Rachel. There's no hello, hi, I'm your nephew, Jacob. It's hi, I want to marry your daughter. He gets right to it. And Laban, the businessman, he immediately sees here, this is my golden goose, because I've been plotting to marry off Leah for the longest time, and this is my chance. So he's thinking and scheming from the very beginning. Maybe I guess the pickings are slim in Paddan Aram. We don't really know. But instead of being kind towards his family member, he sees Jacob purely as, this is an advantage for me. See, we do see earlier in the story that Laban is a businessman through and through. We actually met him before in the episode with Abram's servant and Rebekah. There he was only Rebekah's brother. Now he's the uncle because he's related to Jacob. But even then, he's always calculating. He's always shrewd. In other words, Laban can match Jacob, go toe-to-toe for manipulative jerkiness. Right? If Jacob is a manipulative jerk, Laban is even more so. He's kind of a gold digger. He is heartless. He is scheming. He is greedy. Look at what happened back in chapter 24. As soon as Laban saw not this wonderful servant from my family and how God is blessing everyone. No, as soon as Laban saw the ring and the bracelets on his sister's arms and heard the words of Rebekah, his sister, thus the man spoke to me, he went to the man, and behold, he was standing by the camels at the spring. And he said, come in, O blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside? I've prepared the house and a place for the camels. Laban sees dollar signs wherever he goes. That's the only thing that Laban cares about. And so here, chapter 29, they negotiate really as if they were total strangers. There's no sense that there's any kind of family bond here. And Jacob is so head over heels in his passionate love that he makes the rookie mistake when you're negotiating, right? You offer low first, right? You don't want to overspend. Always offer low, and then they'll go high, and then you meet somewhere in the middle. Jacob offers way high from the start. And Laban says, yeah, okay, that's great. Right? 7 years is extortion. See, we don't have dowries anymore. That's a concept that's just fallen out of our culture. But a dowry, a bride price, is something that's very much alive 3,000 years ago in the Middle East. It's compensation for the loss of a daughter. These days, they say, if you're going to get engaged, you're supposed to spend, 3 to 6 months of salary on her. What's the wisdom today, Sam? What's the ballpark? Okay. Me too. I'm a broke pastor. Yeah, Esther's ring is small, but yeah. Conventional wisdom says maybe 3 to 6 months of salary is for an engagement ring. That's what you're supposed to spend. In the ancient world, it would have been more like 3 or 4 years at a shepherd's wages for a bride price. Even considering that, it's so much more. 7 years' wages is extreme by any measure. And yet it's Jacob's idea. It's his foolish idea in his passion. But see, if you're Laban, what do you do when your nephew says, I'll serve you for 7 years if you're a good uncle? You say, no, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to extort you. I don't accept. You go low. But Laban is not a good uncle. Family doesn't concern him at all. You see how he's treating his daughters terribly also. They are just as equally pawns for his own economic advantage. And the trick that he's about to pull on Jacob is years in the planning. It's like at the end of every heist movie ever, like you think about Ocean's 11 and that last scene where they do all the reveal that literally the thieves were pulling the strings all along, and all of the scenes that you just watched and interpreted one way were actually completely another way. And here's what you didn't see behind the scenes, and here's how they got away with the heist, because they planned it from the very beginning and they thought of every detail. That's exactly what Laban's doing here. He's saying one thing and thinking the exact opposite in his back of his mind, and it just parallels the way that Jacob tricked Esau in the previous chapter. Actually, it's worse, because in this case, it's premeditated over the course of many years. He does the same thing that Jacob did, pretend that one sibling is the other in order to get my way. But we'll come back to that a little bit later. See, when the 7 years are finally up, it's just a couple of words. Okay, I'll serve you 7 years, and then 7 years were over. Nice cut there. He's garnished Jacob's wages. He's kept back his shepherding wages, all while benefiting from his skilled labor for 7 years. And the day finally at last arrives. And it says that Jacob genuinely doesn't mind. It says that they seemed a few days to him. I mean, wow, that's love, guys. To toil for 7 years and say, because of my love for you, it seemed like just a couple of days. It was nothing. 3,000 years ago, the way that they did weddings it wasn't just like a one-day thing. It would be a week-long feast. You would gather all your friends and family, and you would literally throw a massive party for an entire week with everyone you knew, tons of guests. And then the bride and the groom would finally come together on the last day of the feast. So you can imagine, brings his wife out. It's dark. There's no light bulbs. They've probably all been drinking, so they're a little bit sloppy. It's nighttime. They would have only really been whispering to each other, so there's no major voice cues to tip anybody off. Leah would have been wearing many veils to cover her face. And actually, they didn't even really spend a lot of one-on-one time together before the marriage back then, so they wouldn't really have even known a lot of these big clues that we would normally think would tip them off right away. Like, we read this, like, how on earth could Jacob possibly be fooled? And yet, when you really think about it, it's not that outlandish. And the text is just as brief. It says, actually, if you literally read the Hebrew, it's just, in the morning, Leah. It's meant to shock. This is the ultimate slap in the face. See, they seemed a few days. The 7 years of hard labor seemed really short because of my love for Rachel specifically. And now at the last moment, the rug is pulled out from under him. He's tricked, he's deceived, he's robbed. But of course, Laban has counted on that also. See, Laban was deliberately ambiguous the whole time in his reply to Jacob. He's got a clever loophole here. He never actually said out loud, yes, Jacob, you can marry Rachel. He never said that. It's like his fingers were crossed the whole time. And the guests, this massive crowd of people who are celebrating, that keeps Jacob from outright rejecting Leah. See, they don't know that Jacob has been tricked. It would be this whole big mess and scene for him to call Laban out for this obvious trickery. And so he says, fulfill her week, finish this wedding feast. We're both in a tight spot here, right? Let's keep face. Let's just obey all of the social everything that's going on. And you know what? If you still want Rachel, that's fine. You can serve me another 7 years. How outrageous is that? At least he gets Rachel up front this time. But that is Laban's selfish character coming out. He's a loving guy. He loves number one. He's looking out for himself. And this is a sadly familiar kind of love, kind of human desire today. Laban is a caricature of the money-loving schemer who always has an angle. But then we see another example of human desire and the need for love in this passage, because we need to look at Leah and Rachel, because they are coming at marriage from the other end. They're looking for a husband's love. They too are looking for love, and they're glad when a suitable suitor happens to just show up at their door, right? Okay, he's from the right family. He checks all the other right boxes. But the problem is there's two of them and only one of him. This is like the first love triangle in the whole story of the world. It doesn't actually tell us whether Leah secretly loves Jacob or not, but she certainly seems to be a willing participant in this deception. Maybe Leah's desperate, maybe Leah is jealous, who knows? The question for us is, do you allow your fear to drive you to sin? Because again, it's not wrong for them to be seeking marriage. Marriage is the normal state that most of you should be aiming at eventually. But also, it speaks to Jacob's shallowness and his immaturity. We're not excusing any of that. It is straight up messed up to reject Leah for her hot younger sister. The Hebrew is actually even more blunt and explicit. Some versions kind of smooth over this. They say, oh, Leah was unloved. No, she's not just unloved. It's there in your ESV. Leah was hated. It's not ambiguous. There's no wiggle room here. Jacob hates Leah. He can't stand her. But the thing is, no matter how badly you are treated, your sinful response is always your own. Because now they're married. Can't get divorced. It doesn't smooth over any of the messiness here. Perhaps that teaches us something about the lengths that people should go to try to make even an unhappy marriage work rather than just ending them for convenience. But things are about to get a whole lot worse. Because rather than Jacob learning to love Leah, they compound things by giving Jacob both sisters. And polygamy is rightly offensive to us. But yet, it's a matter of fact in the Old Testament, especially early on. Certainly, it violates God's design. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, not wives, not as many women as he wants, one wife, and they shall become one flesh. That's the way God designed marriage. This is a violation of that, and yet God is patient. He's not going to flip the cart all at once. He tolerates this sin for a little while. I'll give you what is admittedly an imperfect analogy. So Noah, my son, he's a month old today, and he pees on me a lot. It just happens. This is a part of life. Now, it's not quite the same, obviously, because there's the issue of physiology. Like he literally, physically, his body can't help it. And yet the principle is, this is something to be corrected when he is mature enough for it to be corrected, when he ought to be expected to learn better. No one expects their 1-month-old to be able to learn, hey, don't pee on your dad. It's not nice, right? And so specifically later on, God will in fact forbid in the law his people from marrying two sisters. Leviticus 18, you shall not take a woman as a rival wife to her sister while her sister is still alive. God puts that explicitly in his commandments for his people. But that's not around yet in the age of the patriarchs, when the earth is a lot more sparsely populated. There's just less people, and the gene pool is more pure. And you really have to be consistent with your indignation. If you're going to get mad about the polygamy, you should also probably be getting mad about the fact that they're first cousins as well, because that's a whole another bucket of worms. I mean, you look at the inbreeding of European royals that resulted in this guy, Charles II of Spain, and that's actually what he looked like. His chin is like that because he's deformed. He was actually severely mentally handicapped late in life, and he wasn't even really able to rule because he was just an infant well into his, I think he died at around the age of 30. That's what happens when close people marry and have children again and again today, but back then there was less genetic degradation of the population of the world because of sin, and so they're able to marry their cousins, and it doesn't lead to these kinds of problems. So we have a situation where here's something that God doesn't say is okay, he's not condoning it, but he also doesn't forbid it yet, at least at this early stage. It simply is. It's the status quo, and to go further than that is to speculate why God permits sin at all. Simply, we have to say it's not his design, but it's something that's tolerated for now. But again, it's not his design. This is not their best option. And so it obviously sucks for these two girls, doesn't it? See, sin always makes life more complicated. These poor sisters are caught in the middle. Later on, they're going to actually kind of repeat things, and Jacob will again be stuck in the middle. He'll be used like a pawn by his new wives, just like he was used for years and years by Uncle Laban as they jockey for position within their new family. Actually, if you look carefully at the way that Leah is naming her sons, every single son that comes out, she names them in a way that is actually a jab at Rachel. And it shows where Leah's heart is at. Yeah, Leah has been sinned against gravely. She's in a terrible situation, but it shows also how she is haunted by being unloved. See, nobody comes out of this messy situation smelling good. In every case, we see human desires for good, even God-designed, God-ordained things that are a blessing. Marriage, prosperity, those things are both there in Genesis 1. How does God say, I'm going to bless these people I've just created? What does he tell them? Be fruitful, multiply, that means have families and have babies. Fill the earth and subdue it. Marriage and prosperity are both right there. The desires in this chapter for marriage from two directions, looking for a wife, looking for a husband, love, affection, acceptance, stability, safety, even the desire for prosperity on Laban's part, right? The 8th commandment actually requires you, as we see in the Catechism, to lawfully promote yours and your neighbor's material prosperity. Lawfully being the key word there. Right? Not ruthlessly at any cost like Laban does. But we see how those good desires for marriage and prosperity very quickly degenerate and devolves into cycles and entrenched patterns of sin, advantage taking, and mutual abusiveness. So we have to step back and ask, why in the world is this disaster of a family in the Bible? Why are these folks specifically chosen? And that brings us to our second, and I promise much shorter point this morning, which is God's plan behind all of this mess. See, we zoom out and we recognize that the human actors are not the only characters on this stage. The Lord is also present. He sees everything that's going on. Nothing escapes him. And at key points, he intervenes directly. But really, at the same time, he's actually superintending all of this chaos all along and subverting it for his own good, wise purposes. So what in the world could God be doing through this nightmare of a family? That's what we need to figure out. Well, first of all, God is about justice, or really we could say love in action. This chapter shows us that God brings suitable justice eventually. Jerks like Jacob will get jerked around. They can expect that. The deceiver is himself deceived. Not all the time, not right away, but certainly here it is poetic and purposeful. Right? Galatians 6:7 tells us, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever one sows, that he will also reap. What goes around comes around. And the parallels are actually uncanny. God has specifically designed this to be justice for Jacob. Jacob deceived with 2 brothers. Now he is deceived with 2 sisters. In the case of deceiving his father Isaac, he took advantage of his blindness. Laban takes advantage of the darkness of night and the veils. Isaac and Jacob are both wined and dined to soften them up, to make the trick easier. And just to drive home the irony all the way, Laban doesn't actually say, we don't give the older before the younger. The actual word that he uses is, we don't give the firstborn before the younger. That's simply not done. See, what Jacob did to Esau, even though God planned it, was from Jacob's point of view morally reprehensible, and Laban understands that. It is simply not done to put the younger before the firstborn, as you yourself, Jacob, have done in stealing the blessing and inheritance of the firstborn. Haran Paddan Aram is a kind of punishment. It's symbolic exile. The key word of this whole chapter is serve. It's a foreshadowing of Egypt, slavery, hard labor. This chapter stretches over a 14-year scene, and actually, it's not over yet, because Laban continues to cheat and manipulate Jacob and oppress him and change his wages, and the next 2 chapters plays that out. Genesis 31, these 20 years, this is Jacob speaking to Laban, I've been in your house, I've served you for 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flock, and you've changed my wages 10 times. The sisters themselves live a life of constant rivalry and conflict. Jacob's home is not a peaceful one. Chapter 30 is all about their competition, their back and forth. Jacob himself is reduced to a pawn again and again in the sisters' one-upsmanship, just as he used his own family before. Jacob is put right in his own place. God's administering justice in this way is actually the most loving thing that he could possibly do for Jacob. You know, I am an impatient person. I know that about myself. But do you know when I notice my impatience the most clearly? It's in really small things. Like if you're impatient when you're cooking eggs, you're going to put the heat too high and your eggs aren't going to come out good. If you're impatient when you're driving, you're going to tailgate, you're going to have a heavy foot, and you're going to get less gas mileage. It's going to cost you money, right? Even, happy wife, happy life, right? I have that twinge of impatience, like, no, I don't want to get you water. That's terrible. That's a horrible thing for me. But it's like, no, I am a selfish, impatient person, and it's in those little things that I'm actually able to see that, right? +1 for the wisdom of God. I should have just listened and learned that. Jacob is here learning the hard way so that he won't have to suffer the hardest thing, which is to really get his own way at last and to lose out on the God who has promised to be with him. And so if you're looking around at the chaos of your own life and you think to yourself that just maybe God is allowing you to taste the bitter taste of your own medicine, then the answer is maybe this is an opportunity for me to wake up, to recognize my sin for what it is. See, the word in the Bible, confession, simply means to agree with God. Sometimes you need that rude shock, that exposure to bring you to that point. Imagine Jacob's thought when the words actually cross his lips, when he grabs Laban by his shirt and he says, "You tricked me." And then that lead cannonball in the stomach as the realization hits him that actually I tricked my father and brother first. I'm a deceiver. I deserve this. But God's not only about justice, God's about transformation in this chapter. He's about getting Jacob to look for that love that he's looking for in the right place. Because you remember last week, that encounter at Bethel, Jacob has everything that he could possibly be looking for, and yet he's still looking in the world. Jacob has had this amazing experience of God's grace at Bethel, these promises of love and provision from the God of the universe, and yet he still quickly forgets and lives a prayerless and powerless life. He's practically speaking an orphan, away from his parents and away from the fatherhood of God. Bethel seems to have made no lasting impact on his life. He's still chasing his needs in his own power, not trusting God to come through on his promises. And for all the difficulty and discomfort that Jacob is going through, he never once prays about it. Until chapter 32, his transformation is slow. It's simmering in the background, but it's at this stage of things far from ripe. Jacob is physically strong. He's able to move the stone. He's very passionate. He weeps. He's incredibly driven. He is spiritually weak. God is bringing him through this place, putting him on blast a little bit to effect an inner transformation, not just about his outward behavior, but the whole heart, the whole inner being, the soul of this man. He's fighting for Jacob, not against him. And by the time Jacob leaves Haran, that redirection of his longings has at last taken root, and he's a totally different man. So I ask you this morning, where do you find your status, your value, your worth, the things that you love? Is it in relationships? Is it in fulfillment, however you define that? Is it meeting cultural expectations and gaining social esteem? Or is it in the pleasure and fellowship of God? What has God already promised you that you so often forget, and God is trying to get your attention back? How is God perhaps resisting you for a time until you turn? Guys, avoid some of the heartache along the way by giving yourself these reminders in your life and telling yourself where to look. But even if not, if you are one of the stubborn ones like Jacob and God lets you wreck your life for a little while, even that can be evidence of his life-changing grace towards you. God has a purpose in all of it. Pray for eyes to see beyond your immediate circumstance or your moment, and really ask God, what are you trying to accomplish in me? How are you molding me into the man or woman that you desire? How are my present hardships a chance to grow in purity, chastity, honesty, patience, faithfulness, endurance, love, or prayer? Because you're not going to find those things in the world. And it's only when your world crumbles, when your schemes blow up in your face, that your heart begins to change. The Bible uses the example of the refining of gold, and it talks about gold and dross a lot. Do you know how you refine gold? Gold, when you take it out of the ground, it's like stuck inside of a rock. It's got a lot of non-gold in it. So you got to throw it into a furnace. You've got to heat it up until it's boiling, far hotter than water boils, thousands and thousands of degrees. You got to put it in this really, really hot blazing fire, and then all of the stuff that's not actually gold bubbles up to the surface. It gets worse. It exposes itself. All of the crap, all of the garbage, everything that's not valuable comes to the surface so that you can see it. And only then does the refiner scrape it off with a long rake, and then the gold is purified. He repeats that process again and again. Turn up the heat really high. All of the junk boils to the top, and then slowly you repeat that again and again and again. And how do you know it's pure? It's when you can see his face reflected in the top surface of that gold. These are hot times for Jacob here in Haran, as God refines and purifies him. He's allowing that garbage to bubble up to the surface so that he can scrape it away until he sees his own image clearly in Jacob. But lastly, God is about redemption in this chapter. We see love not in the world, but coming down from above, both for Jacob and then for the whole world. Remember God's promises last week at Bethel, because they're promises for you too, through and in Jesus Christ. The only way to avoid the dehumanizing effects, the pitfall of unbridled desires, is to realize how Christ provides and satisfies those desires. See, Leah is the wrong wife in this chapter, only in the eyes of Jacob, not in God's eyes. Leah is exactly who Jacob was supposed to marry. Jesus, the Messiah, the Redeemer of the world, is born of the line of Leah, not of Rachel. You know who comes from Rachel? If Jacob had gotten his way, you know who Rachel's sons are? Ephraim and Manasseh, the apostates, the ones who are committing idolatry and turning away. Judah, the line of the Messiah, comes from Leah, the unloved one. Not only does Jesus come from the unloved wife, Jesus comes to the outcasts and the unloved ones of the world. See, in this family's struggle for love and wrestling with one another to somehow get the things that all humans need and desire, actually the whole world is being loved beyond belief because God is working out his plan to do the most loving thing in sending his son through this woman many centuries later. John 3:16, the most famous verse in the Bible, God so loved the world that he sent his son. Jacob probably doesn't feel very successful in his quest for love here. God says, stop. Look over here. Look at me. Look what I'm doing. I've told you a little bit about my conversion in middle school, but I remember very clearly the song that they were singing when that thing just happened to me, when that snap, that break happened. And I won't make us sing it because it's campy and cheesy, but these lyrics just broke me at that time. It's just what the Holy Spirit can speak through a donkey. He can use bad song lyrics to break people. I've searched the whole world over looking for the things that I thought would fill my heart and ease my pain. I can climb the highest mountain or sail beyond the seas, but it always brings me back to you again. It's amazing how you love me. It's amazing how you care. It's amazing how you're always thinking of me all the time, everywhere. Not the most theologically precise, and yet God gives hope in the midst of self-inflicted pain and emptiness. And the people who understand the amazingness of God's love are the people who, like Jacob, understand that they can't find it in the world, that their schemes have blown up in their face, and that they don't actually deserve God pursuing them like that. John 10:10. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy, but I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. Jesus came to give people in the midst of their self-inflicted pain hope. Centuries later, Jesus the Messiah is born. He stands next to another well. Do you know whose well it is? John 4. It's Jacob's well. And he promises living water, satisfaction of our deepest, most fundamental desires, in line not with our plans, but with his, an unconditional love to broken people in whom grace is secretly working. And just like Jacob, we too are redeemed out of a world of sin and death and hard labor by the intervention of God. Like Jacob, we come out with victory and riches and real soul transformation, but just not quite yet. There's a totally new life, full provision of your every need, your soul-consuming needs, and that is the love of God. He's promised. He's fulfilled those promises by giving you his own self. Brothers and sisters, in your lowest moments, when you're searching for love and you can't find it, remember that you are loved in Christ, and stop striving and receive what's already yours. Will you pray with me? Merciful Father, we confess that we live like Jacob almost every single day. You've promised us these amazing things in your word through your Son, Jesus Christ, and yet we live like orphans. We are full of weakness and searching for what we think will satisfy us, and we live broken lives because we don't allow you to fill us. Father, would you show us that all of these desires are to point us to you, that you're doing something in the background to draw us to yourself.